do we come from? What is the true story of humanity's history? It's very different from what we've been taught in school. There is much more to learn than what the official version of reality allows us to know, as we've discovered through the many wonderful people that we've been blessed to meet and gain knowledge and insight from over the course of the years through the research that we've done. To everybody who has been a Dragonology fan and who has written in and who's bought the book and who's just been cheering on the series and taken such an interest in it, it's really been so inspiring to be able to deliver this information to you all. And for those who are interested in purchasing Dragonology Book 1 Spellbreaker, please go to my website, dragonology.info, and you're welcome to buy an ebook version of the book there. And remind you just how spectacular this journey of discovery has been.
Hello everybody, good to be back with you again. My name is Mel V and this is Conscious Consumer Network coming to you live. Tonight we have an episode of Dragonology Season 4, Episode 4. Yes, we are on the 4th season and on Episode 4, and it's going to be, as per the last 3 episodes, dealing with the numerological aspects of Dragonology. So getting on to the themes for this particular episode, of course, dealing with everything to do with the number 4 and its related symbolism, and of course dealing with the things that tie into the number 4, such as the square, the cube, and all the allegories associated with that. And we're going to be going on to the symbolic expression related to dragon physiology. And this is an interesting recap plus some new information for people just to enhance and enrich the already existing deep multi-layered Dragonology information that we have been putting out for the last 3 seasons. So for those of you who've tuned in, thank you very much. It's great to be with you, and sit back, enjoy, because this is going to be an information-packed episode. Starting with the basics, of course, the number 4. 4 is the number of organization and the perfect rhythm. Of course, when we look at music, everything with regards to music, as we know, music, of course, originates with ritual, and there are normally 4 beats in a bar. That's how music is structured. So it's considered to be the number of rhythm and music. In Greek mythology, 4 is the number of Jupiter. And it's the number of a live law, and for Jupiter being the master of protection and justice and the organizer of all that was created. 4 is considered to be by the initiate the root of all things, and supposedly the symbol of totality and balance. Of course, 2 + 2 = 4. The duality times the duality being the 4th. Looking at 4 in different languages is also very interesting because it gives you an idea of some other allegories that we're going to be dealing with throughout this particular episode. So let's just take a look at the number 4 in different languages. In Dutch or German, the number 4 is vier, with V-I-E-R. Swedish, it's fire. And then when you go to the Norwegian, you get fire. French, it's quatre. Latin, quator. Okay, as in quarter, and in Greek, tessaris. And of course, that's interesting when you start looking at the word tessellator, when you look at tessellated tiles or squares. And all of those themes are going to be covered off. But the most important one we're going to start with first being the fire, okay, because fire is the 4th element. And it's interesting to notice that because over here, of course, the Norwegian word for 4 is, in fact, fire. Fire then being the 4th element, and we will be dealing with 5 elements in the next Dragonology episode, which is episode 5. But for now, we're dealing with the 4 basic elements of creation, fire being the 4th one, and it's also the number 4 in Norwegian is the word fire. Very interesting. And these things aren't a coincidence. Just, because they happen to be that way. Everything within Dragonology is intricately interwoven into each other. So it all has significance. The 4th letter of the alphabet is the letter D. And we've dealt with the letter D quite a bit in previous Dragonology episodes. And of course, the letter D forms part of the DJ sound, which evolved into the J, the G, the hard G for God, goat, and great. And the DJ, as we have previously discussed, in Egyptian hieroglyphics, the phonetic sound DJ is represented by the lexicon or the symbolic expression of the cobra at rest, which is this little guy over here. And that's how you normally find the phonetic sound J expressed in Egyptian hieroglyphics, like a cobra at rest. So interesting to see immediately serpent symbolism coming in here, as is always found within Dragonology. The number 4 represents the union of the 3 persons of the Holy Trinity in one being. Now, we dealt with the Holy Trinity in episode 3. For if you haven't seen that, folks, go back and watch episode 3, and you'll see how important the Trinity is in this aspect. But of course, the Trinity represented as the one being, which is the 4th aspect. In this sense, the number 4 symbolizes the family being considered as another image of the number 1. And this is represented over here in this particular diagram, where you've got the 3, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And then, of course, these 3 elements combine to make the 4th element, which is actually another image of the one God represented in 3 aspects. A square is made up of 4 right angles and 4 sides. So you've got 4 right angles and, of course, 4 sides to the square. The sum of the 4 right angles totals 360 degrees, and of course that is a divisible of 3. Again, please do watch episode 3 to see why that is important. The number 3 being very significant to the Dragonology exploration. Right angle. All right, so we've got the 4 right angles over here. Let's deal with the right angle. The word right stems from the dragon root word rit, which is present in words such as rite or ritual. The word write as in to write with a pen or to write a letter. Ivrit, of course, being the Hebrew expression for the word for the Hebrew language. If you speak Ivrit, it means you speak Hebrew. Then Sanskrit, of course. Sanskrit is from the Indonesian and Indo-European kind of original language. It came before Latin. Sanskrit. And then Ifrit. Ifrit is an Arabic classification for a dragon or a jinn. Spirit. Interesting. Spirit has the root word rit in it as well. And of course, sprite, which is a form of angel or fairy. And of course, as we know, fairies are in fact dragons. The word angle, interestingly enough, stems from the dragon root word angel, and which actually has the key dragon root A-N-G in it. And we'll go on to deal with that a little bit more as we go through this episode. And of course, angel is rooted in the Latin words anguim or angui. That's where it comes from. Anguim or angui meaning serpent or dragon. So that's where we get the word angel from. And for those who think angels are pretty little, angelic, sweet things, actually nothing could be further from the truth. An angel is just another representation of the dragon. As we've already mentioned, the Greek word thesaurus comes to play here when you start looking at black and white square tiles that you find in churches and Masonic lodges, also known as tessellation. Thesaurus, tessellation, that's where those words come from. Thesaurus being the Greek word for 4. Black and white tessellated tiles are usually found in some very interesting places. And the black and white represents the dualistic nature of the gods or the dragons. And the square represents the footprint of the gods or the dragons. The dragon knowledge. Now, it was the dragons who taught humanity how to build temples of worship. And, so right angles and squares don't occur naturally in nature. This is a man-made feature. So it's important that as we've already spoken about, why we cover off the right angle aspect, because the right angle is very much an indication of dragon geometry. It was the dragons that taught humanity the arts of writing, architecture, geometry, agriculture. In fact, these were gifts given to humanity by the dragons. And temples are usually built with right angles or in a square format, and sometimes they're orientated towards the four directions of north, south, east, and west. And we'll get onto the four directions later. But that's generally what happens. This, of course, is an artistic representation of King Solomon's temple. You can see very squared off looking building, lots of right angles in there. The geometric shape known as the cube is made up of 6 equal squares. And in fact, the word cube is etymologically cognizant with the word keb, meaning heel or foot, which is allegorical of the footprint of the dragons. As we've already said, the square is the footprint of the dragon. It was the use of right angles and squares came to us with the use of geometry and with the arts of building. And of all that knowledge was in fact given to humanity by the dragons. The word cube, in turn, is etymologically cognizant with the word Kaaba, which references a cube-shaped building at the center of Islam's most important mosque and is considered by Muslims to be the house of God. Here we go. Here's a picture of the Kaaba, which is covered with a black cloth. And what's interesting to notice is that it is probably the most sacred place that Muslims hold dear. In fact, Muslims all around the world try at least once in their life to make a pilgrimage to Mecca to visit this Kaaba stone, which they then circle 7 times. And this pilgrimage is called the Hajj, and it's considered an absolute must-do in a Muslim's life. Even if they only do it once, all Muslims are required to make this pilgrimage to Mecca. The cube or the cross is interesting because if you unfold a cube, the 6 sides of the cube unfold to form a cross. That's, of course, if you keep them all joined up. And here you can see the 6 parts of the cross, which is made of 6 squares. But if you fold them up, you get a little cube. And, of course, the cross is a common symbolic representation of Christianity or Christ. The 4 cross is interesting because just like we're dealing with the 4th episode and the number 4, when you have a look at this, the cube cross, you actually, or just the cross, you can actually find the cross here in the number 4. And that's how most people write the number 4, is normally with 2 lines crossing over each other, joined with an angled line on the left-hand side. The number 4 is symbolically allegorical of the Christian cross, which is actually the cross of the zodiac, which we'll get into. Here we go. Here's the cross of the zodiac. Interesting to notice again, the number 4 keeps reoccurring when you look at this stuff, because here we've got quarters. The cross of the zodiac divides the zodiac cycle into 4 parts over here. So we've got the solstice and equinox lines, which divide the zodiac circle into 4 parts, 4 quarters. And this is where you get the Christian cross from. And it's in fact a solar allegory. Here you can see that Christian cross is based on the horizontal and vertical intersecting lines of the zodiac, which mark out the solstices and the equinoxes. And many people have seen pictures of Jesus with this particular solar cross behind them, the round circle, which is in fact a sun disk, and the cross through it. And that's what the cross of the zodiac actually is. The cross of the zodiac is a symbolic representation which marks the sun's journey through the sky over a course of a year. And it's one of the oldest conceptual images known to man, and a concept that was in fact bequeathed to us by the dragons. And the zodiac and astrology and all of that, how we identify various astrological symbols, was also given to us by the dragons in various symbolic allegories that all have roots in dragonology. Jesus is often depicted with a sun cross halo behind his head, which is indicative of the fact that Jesus was, in fact, a solar deity or a sun god. And this shouldn't be new to those of you who have followed on this information quite a bit. We've presented so much evidence and data to prove that this is, in fact, the case. And the fact that Jesus was a solar deity was known by some of the most highly initiated artists of our time, some of the great masters, such as Leonardo da Vinci, who was in fact a member of the Priory of Sion, a very secretive Catholic order. And the allegory of Jesus being a solar deity is in fact encoded into Leonardo da Vinci's work, such as The Last Supper. In fact, The Last Supper clearly shows that the same four splits, here we go, here the four seasons, summer, spring, autumn, and winter, with Jesus being the sun in the middle. 4 seasons. We're dealing with the 4 seasons now, of course. A year is a measurement of time that is marked by the orbital period of the Earth moving in its orbit around the sun. A season is a division of the year marked by changes in weather, ecology, and the amount of daylight. There are 4 seasons, which divides the solar year into quarters. And it's interesting to know when we're measuring time, as we say here, this is a measurement of time. 4 seasons is a year, which is a measurement of time. Quarters comes up again when you take that down to a much smaller scale. When you look at, for example, the clock, which generally measures a 12 or 24-hour period, a daytime period. When measuring time, we use a watch or a wristwatch, like we put on our arm, or we put a clock on the wall. We call it a watch in English. And what's interesting to notice is that's where you get words such as watches. The dragons were known as the watchers in the Bible. Also, words such as peer and spy are heavily rooted in dragon etymology. And the Dutch word for watch is horloge. And this word comes originally from the word Horus. And from Horus, we actually get the word hours, which, of course, if you're looking at times and clocks, the word hours ties in. All you have to do is swap around the U and the S, and you have the word hours. And the clock is, in fact, divided into quarters. And when we talk about, for example, when you're telling time in English, you say it is a quarter past the hour. He left at a quarter to 10. We use the word quarters. And you can clearly see here the quarters that the clock is divided into, much like the cross of the zodiac. It's the same template. And this is not an accident. They do this deliberately, use the same symbolic allegory because it has power. There is much deeper, multi-layered components to this, which ultimately play out the same draconian construct and Ophidian vibration, which controls everything and is intricately interwoven into the fabric of our reality. And most people don't even question the deeper allegorical meaning and why these symbols all look so very similar. The word quarter is interesting because it turns up in some interesting places, and I thought tonight we'd delve into one of my favorite ancient artworks, which again plays out this number 4 very, very well. And this number allegory that we find popping up in the Da Vinci painting, which is the 12 disciples, which are divided into groups of 4 with 3 disciples in each. And just to pop back to that over here, so you've got 12 disciples, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. But look, they're all divided into groups. So you've got 3 over here, 3 over here, 3 over here, and 3 over here, making a total of 4 groups of 3. And this 4, 3, and 12 play out very interestingly in this particular depiction called the Quaternion Nenadler, which references the occult mathematical code that Da Vinci encoded into the Last Supper, which is the 12 feathers, and you can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, the feathers are interesting, and we get more into the feathers aspect in a bit. We covered this off in episode 3, but we shall revise this because it's very important. So 12 feathers, and you can see there's 4 groups. 3 here face downwards, and 3 here are facing upwards, clearly indicating that they are bunched into 2 separate groups, and very much the same on this side. So you've got 4 groups of 3, much like the Da Vinci painting with the disciples in 4 groups of 3. And of course, 4 times 3 equals 12. Feathers. Feathers are a symbolic reference to the feathered, winged, or flying serpent or dragon. In the natural world, only birds have feathers, hence why birds are often used as a symbolic allegory alluding to dragons. And there are many birds that are used as symbolic allegories of the dragons, such as the peregrine falcon, which is what Horus is depicted as. He's normally depicted as the peregrine falcon. Peregrine falcon being one of the fastest animals on the planet, and also noted by this marking over here, this kind of black marking which hooks back behind the eye. That is the distinctive marking of the peregrine falcon. The owl, of course, the owl inextricably linked with goddess Ishtar and, of course, the goddess Athena and Minerva. The owl being present at Bohemian Grove as well, a 200-foot owl before which they worship. And the swan. The swan is interesting because it's also been used as a symbolic allegory of the dragon. Think of Swan Lake. The shape-shifting swan turns into a princess, of course, the royalty theme. Then the eagle. Of course, Zeus was often depicted as an eagle, and you often see the Roman eagle on various locations, on the back of the $1 bill, and all sorts. And, of course, the phoenix. The phoenix is supposedly the feminine counterpart of the dragon and is a mythological bird that's supposedly born from fire. And the ibis. The ibis as well. We've spoken about the ibis in episode 2 of Dragonology season 4. The ibis being a bird and a common representation of the dragon. And then, of course, there's the Holy Spirit dove. When we speak about the Holy Trinities, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Latin word for dove is, in fact, columba. A Latin expression of a serpent is colubra, both containing the dragon root word colu. That's a dragon root word. From the dragon root word colu, root word group, which is inclusive of the roots such as colo, Kula, Dracula, Cola, think Coca-Cola, Cali, think California, Kulu and Kolu, as in column. That's why you find so many columns in churches, because it's anchoring that dragon or Ophidian vibration. And it's interesting, that's why we use a dove allegory in the Holy Trinity, because it is in fact representing the dragon, the columba. And of course, the bird is also known, the dove is also known as the Holy Spirit. And of course, we've already mentioned spirit contains 2 dragon root words, the S-P-I and the R-I-T, the root word of ritual. Feathers turn up in some interesting places, and it just keeps reoccurring over and over again because, as we've already mentioned, feathers are a symbol of the dragon. And for those of you who have seen various depictions of the Egyptian pharaohs, you may not know that these are in fact ostrich feathers on the crowns. This is how they are represented or stylized in Egyptian artwork and iconography. But normally appearing on the pharaohs' crowns, you'll see these lovely ostrich feathers. And here we've got a serpent coming down this particular headdress. But this is a version of this. It's a statue, and this, of course, being a painting. In the American Indians, which is, in another continent to the ancient Egypt, they also wear the feathered headdress. In fact, the Hopi do something called the snake dance, which is part of their fertility rituals. And this is a Sioux chief. In fact, the word Sioux actually is a word meaning serpent. Feathers in fairy tale are allegorical of the dragon, and you'll notice that they very subtly slipped in there, beyond the perception of most people who don't really realize what the deeper allegory is. But you see the feather turning up in some interesting places, for example, in the hat of Disney's Peter Pan, and in fact, Robin Hood. And Robin Hood is just an evolved allegory of Peter Pan. They're very much based on the same original caricature type. feathers on the head are important as well. There are many depictions of ancient gods who have feathers on their head or wings on their head, such as you see over here. And that's interesting because when you have feathers appearing in places that they wouldn't normally appear, for example, on the back of a human being, wings or feathers, such as in angels or fairies, that's normally symbolic of the dragon, just as it is when it appears on the head. It is symbolic of the dragon. And the Gorgon Medusa is in fact depicted with feathers on the head. That's what these are over here. You can see them. This is a marble carving, and this is a pictorial carving, and this is often the logo of Versace. They use the Gorgon Medusa, and of course the serpents, these are serpents around it over here. And the word Gorgon is interesting because it's got the dragon root word OR, the OR dragon root word. The double G, which I've mentioned before, is symbolic of the dragon. The G and the G derived from the DJ, J. And of course, Gon, which is the root word of dragon. So Gorgon is interesting. And then you have the feathers which turned up on the feet, not just on the head, but you see them on the feet of ancient deities, on carvings of ancient deities. In fact, it's the word serpentipedis. Okay, notice the root serpent and pedis. Pedis means foot, pedi, foot. Serpentipedis means dragon-footed. If a being is depicted with wings on their feet or winged feet, they are said to be serpentipedis, meaning they are dragon-footed. They are, in fact, dragons. People such as Hermes, or I should say the god such as Hermes, is depicted often with wings on the head and on the feet, but also on his staff, the caduceus. Here are the wings on the staff. Notice the twining serpents. And here's an alchemical depiction of Hermes. Of course, notice the wings over here, the feathers, wings on the back, and lots of serpents turning up all over the show, of course, indicative of the dragon. The Mesoamerican feathered serpent is interesting because you'll notice that the feathers turn up as plumage around the head, but also depicted on the serpent itself. In replacement of scales, you have feathers. The feathered serpent, of course, the flying serpent or the feathered serpent, there is in fact temples of the flying or feathered serpent in Mesoamerica. Many carvings and depictions of this. So this feathered serpent allegory turns up all over the world. And then, of course, we mentioned earlier on, we're dealing with the number 4. So we're getting on to that more allegory to do with the number 4, such as the 4 directions: north, east, south, and west. Of course, those are the 4 directions. Again, notice the circle divided up into quarters, like we have when you look at the cross of the zodiac, and like you have when you look at the watch face or the clock. Again, we have the same basic pattern, the circle with the 4 divisions and the quarters that it's divided into. Each direction is, of course, then separated by right angle of 90 degrees, divisibles of 3. A compass is divided into quarters. When you look at a compass, it's normally round, and of course, it's divided into quarters by the north, south, east, and west. And that's important because when you look at the north, south, east, and west, for example, ancient Chinese mythology, you come across the 4 dragon kings. The dragon king of the East Sea, East China Sea, and the dragon king of the South Sea, South China Sea, the dragon king of the West Sea, which is the Indian Ocean and beyond, and the dragon king of the North Sea, which is the Lake Baikal. But what I love of this particular depiction is it's sculptures of the 4 dragon kings in human form. Look at that. Dragon kings in human form. That's very interesting because, of course, the dragons can shapeshift into human form and then back into dragons again. And interesting to notice that they're wearing square hats, as we've already spoken about, the square being 4-sided. And the square hats also turn up in some interesting places. When you graduate from university, for example, a square hat is worn during the university or college graduation ceremonies or rituals. when one obtains a degree. We've spoken about the word degree as well, 90-degree angle. The sun moves in a degree across the sky every single day, which is where you get the 360 degrees of the protractor. And then, of course, there's the 4 supernatural abilities of the dragon, which is the ability to fly, the ability to navigate water or breathe underwater, the ability to change shape or shapeshift, as it's become known in modern day urban myth and legend. And of course, the ability to appear and disappear, like evaporate and just materialize. These are the 4 supernatural abilities that are inextricably associated with the dragon. These are things that most animals do not have. You do have some animals that can fly. You do have some animals that can navigate water. But changing shape and appearing and disappearing, well, those are a little bit more tricky. And certainly you don't have any animals that encompass all 4 of these particular supernatural abilities into one being. This is why we look at the dragons as gods, why they've always been called as gods, why we've revered them. It's when you have these particular abilities and you're able to do so many things that perhaps other beings can't do. And you then have the ability to take power and control less advanced or beings and creatures that simply do not have the same abilities. And then there's the 4 forms of the dragon. Of course, the dragons have appeared in many symbolic forms in various mythological contexts in many different cultures across the world. And although there are many variations, the dragons are commonly depicted symbolically in the following forms. Of course, the most common is the snake, the serpent, and then, of course, the bird, as we've already discussed. The fish, of course, dragons can as we say, navigate or breathe in the water, which is why the fish allegory is very important. And, of course, the bull, goat, or ram. Of course, this is Vishnu in his avatar as the fish, the first avatar of Vishnu. But the bull, goat, and ram is interesting because that's where you get the horned god allegories coming from. All these particular animals are commonly depicted with horns, and that is a common feature of dragons, is the fact that they have horns. In fact, this particular of Vishnu and his fish shows this particular fish with a horn on the head. The 4 most common attributes or physical attributes of the dragon are the fact that they are long, they're lengthily in shape, like a serpent is a long creature. That's what defines a serpent, is this length. It's not a short, stubby, round, podgy creature. In fact, it is a long creature. So dragons are normally depicted long, like a serpent. They're normally depicted with scales, as you can see over here. They're scaly creatures, or with wings, or feathered. The feathers sometimes replace the scales. And they're commonly depicted with horns and fangs. Horns and fangs are interchangeable, as you'll see when you go on to look at the elephant, for example. The horn and the tusks can either be horns or fangs, but it's that same basic thing, that it's a protrusion of a bone mass, either making it the fangs or the horns. So let's get on to the dragon physiology and its related symbolism so you can understand a little bit more about how this all ties in. As we've already discussed, the dragon is long in shape. The Chinese reference to the dragon is by the word lung. Now, it's pronounced lung, as in the lung you breathe with. If you were to say it in the English tongue, the English vernacular, you would use this word, which is actually how it's referenced in Chinese, but it's pronounced lung. The most common and pervasive feature about dragons is their long serpentine bodies. And it's funny because they are long, but they're also called the lung in Chinese mythology. That's what the name of dragons are in the Chinese mythology. They're called the lung because they are long. In Dutch, the word for long is lang, which is also pronounced the same as this, lung. for example, the lung you breathe with. L-A-N-G. You see here we swap out the O and the A. And what's interesting to notice is here's the A-N-G dragon root word of angel, anguium, and angui. And what's interesting to notice is a Dutch expression of a snake or serpent is slung. You put the serpent S at the front and you have the Dutch word or the Afrikaans word for serpent, which is slung. And of course, L-A-N-G is also the root of the word language, interestingly enough, and it was the dragons who taught us how to read and write and gave us our modern day languages. And then, of course, a snake skeleton is made up of a skull, ribs, and spine. The spine is one of the most pervasive features. We've already spoken about the root word SPI, which turns up in some very interesting places, such as spy, spit. It's commonly something serpents do. They spit. Spiral, which is, serpents are often depicted in spiral form. Spirit, we've already spoken about the word spirit. Spite, dragons are very spiteful creatures, very vengeful. Speak, spell, sperm, and species. So this is where you start getting this interesting root coming up. And when you start looking at our origins, where our language came from, the fact that when we speak, we're actually literally casting spells with our words. We are taught to read and write, and in school they teach you how to spell words. And of course, when you talk about the origins of humanity, of course, humanity was created, human beings are created by the joining of the sperm and the egg to create a species of human being. Now, what's interesting is that the spine allegory comes up again and again, and in fact, then moves on to become the column. The column is an interesting, as we've already spoken about, containing the dragon root word kolu, but there's so many root words that tie into each other here. And we spoke already about the D and the J, which forms the hard G. And this is the Jed column. Part of Egyptian symbolism and iconography, the Jed pillar is symbolic of the spine of Osiris. Of course, Jed contains the dragon root word DJ, and the spine contains the SPI, as we've already discussed here. And then, of course, the column. Why do you think we find so many columns in churches and temples? Is because the column is anchoring the dragon vibration. We specifically put columns into churches and temples to anchor the Ophidian or serpent vibration. And then the word fang is interesting. The word fang contains the dragon root word A-N-G, much like the word language and angel. In fact, these words come from the same root: angel, danger, anger, language, angle, we already spoke about, manger. Jesus was said to be placed in a manger when he was born. Angkor Wat, which is a temple structure that's situated in Cambodia and is in the shape of the constellation Draco, Draco being the dragon. And then, of course, sang. Sang is the French word for blood. Think of sangria, a red drink. It's based upon the red wine. Red wine, of course, in church is the replacement of the blood of Christ. And then, of course, the dragons taught us agriculture. So you have it turning up in the words like mango. And, of course, Pangu, who was the creator god of Chinese mythology. Now, when you swap out the A for the E, because consonants are, because vowel sounds are interchangeable in Dragonology, you have things such as English. Of course, the dragons gave us our language. So English, revenge, and henge. Ever wonder why there's so many henges all over the world? That is because they are temples of worship for the dragon. Temples where sacrifice is made. The word fang also alludes to some interesting allegorical etymology. The word fan and fantasy come from the word fang, fantastic, Phanes, which is the protagonist god of Greek mythology. The word alpha, Phanes and alpha, containing the PHA root, which is also the root of phantom. And then, of course, Pan. This is where we get Pan, Fan, and Pan. The P and the F are interchangeable. In fact, the F, if you put a little loop there, is actually a P. And the PH is etymologically, phonetically pronounced as an F sound. PH is an F sound, feigns. So the P and the F inextricably linked. You get words such as Pan, such as the god Pan, we've already covered. And from there you get words such as panic and pain, the common negative polarity words which are always rooted in dragon etymology. And of course, you notice dragons always have nice sets of fangs. Or horns, for that matter. Fangs and horns are interchangeable with each other. Commonly, dragons are depicted with scales like a serpent, and Chinese dragons were considered to be physically concise. Of the 117 scales, 81 are of the yang essence, which is positive, whilst 36 are of the yin essence, which is negative. Initially, the dragon was benevolent, wise, and just, but the Buddhists introduced the concept of malevolent influence among some dragons. Just as water destroys, they said, so can some dragons destroy by floods, tidal waves, and storms. They suggested that some of the worst floods were believed to have been the result of a mortal upsetting a dragon. Interesting, because that's you often hear stories, for example, in the floods of Noah, that God was upset with humanity and destroyed all of humanity with a flood. This is a reoccurring allegory that comes up in many mythologies across the world. And of course, scales. The scales turn up in some interesting places, not just, of course, the scales of a fish or a dragon, but the scales of measurement. Dragons or gods are often characterized as being implementers of law and justice, as well as being responsible for judgment in the underworld. And this, of course, being the scales of justice. And this is interesting when you look at dragon etymology and dragon iconography in ancient Egypt. Of course, the scales of Ma'at is an interesting symbolic allegory. It is said that when people die, their hearts are measured against a feather. The feather turns up again, the feather of Ma'at. And if your heart is heavier than the feather, you supposedly go to the Egyptian version of hell. And if it's not, you apparently, ascend to heaven or whatever the Egyptian version of that is. But your heart is measured against a feather on the scales of Ma'at. And of course, that's the god Anubis who does the measuring. And here we have Horus, again, the bird allegory. And this is the ibis. Okay, you can see the bird allegory coming up again. All of this much deeper allegorical indication of the dragon. Here we go again. You see an actual papyrus painting of these scales of Ma'at. Here we have Anubis, the dog god, measuring the feather of Ma'at against the heart, normally put into a canopic vase and measured. And of course, as you said, if your heart is heavier than the feather, it's not a good thing. And then, of course, the tongue. The tongue is very common in looking, when you look at dragons. You commonly see dragons with a protrusion from the mouth, normally forked or pointed. Okay, this is a common Welsh dragon, a red dragon of Wales. And you'll find this theme recurring over and over again, is this tongue sticking out. In fact, the Komodo dragon and the serpents or snakes commonly stick their tongues out. Lizards and reptiles generally, use their tongue to pick up particles in the air. It's used in a way of as a sensory mechanism, but they like to jut their tongue out. You often see them with their tongue coming out. Commonly, their tongue may be forked or pointed, but the protruding tongue is played out in various dragon allegories in different cultures. For example, the goddess Kali is commonly depicted with her tongue out. This is a more modern representation of the goddess Kali, and this is a 1770 artwork of Kali. Again, you can see the tongue sticking out. Ears. This is an interesting one because this, again, was one of those multi-layered allegories. We've already spoken about the basis of, the wings on the side of the head. Ears, when you're looking at the gods, deities, or dragons, they are sometimes depicted with oversized or very big ears, which are actually symbolic of wings. As we said, we've already seen the gods with the wings on their heads, but big ears are indicative of wings. It's supposedly indicative of the ability to fly. And of course, you can notice again here, the fangs, common feature, big ears, always the same symbolism turning up in dragon allegory. Winged ears, okay, as we've already said, this is a depiction of the Gorgon Medusa, and this is a very similar iconography or lexicon that is used in the Versace logo. You can see the serpents of the Gorgon Medusa, supposedly hair was made of serpents, and the wings on the side of the head where the ears would go. And the wings in the location of the ears are normally an indication or a symbol that that particular deity or representation is in fact a dragon. Big ears are symbolically allegorical of wings, which is why some gods are depicted with massive ears instead of wings. But that's really what it's meant to represent. And you see this over here. We've already looked at this image, but yeah, this is exactly where the ears would go. It's where these wings are. And you can see this here again. The wings on the side of the head where the ears would go. Oversized ears are allegorical of wings, which are allegorical of the dragon. And one way this is played out, interestingly enough, and you can always rely on Disney to, bring the symbolism home to children so that they just accept it and don't question it from a very young age. But, there's much deeper allegory, and it's very, very sinister. It's not as innocent as it might appear. And this is very clear when you start looking, for example, at the character of Dumbo. Dumbo is a Walt Disney character of an elephant with big ears that learns to fly using a magic feather. Here's Dumbo holding a magic feather, okay? The feather symbolism turns up a lot, but it was Dumbo's big ears that allowed him to fly. And the elephant allegory comes up again when you look at the gods Ganesha. And Ganesha, of course, being an elephant, has massive ears, okay? Massive ears, indicative of wings, indicative of the ability to fly, which is characterized and played out in modern day children's cartoons by the character of Dumbo. This is a more modern representation of Ganesha, and this is a much more antique version. You can see Ganesha, of course, being the elephant deity of ancient India. Then, of course, the horns. Horns are symbolic of the dragon. Often you'll find dragons represented by bulls or rams or goats. The common allegory here, of course, being the horns. Dragons and many other deities are often depicted with horns. The word horn, of course, containing the dragon root word O-R, which is the most common dragon root word, horn. Horned gods such as Pan are a common depiction and allegory to the dragon. And of course, here we have Baphomet. Baphomet commonly associated with satanic practices. And you'll notice the wings on the back as well. Notice the serpents here too. The light and the dark. So a lot of symbolism in this particular picture, but horns, of course, indicative of the dragon. And that's where you get words such as horny. This, of course, is a representation of Pan here with the horns, and the word horny obviously stemming from this particular allegory of having horns. Pan was said to be particularly horny. And the word nymph also representation of a god or goddess, and that's where you get words such as nymphomaniac. You'll find this allegory playing out, this sexualized allegory playing out in many different examples. And of course, the bull gods are cross-migratory across many different cultures. Here's the ancient Egyptian bull god, and of course, the Hindu bull god. Again, the most important aspect here being the horns, because of course dragons have horns. And then you start to see the emergence of symbolism coming into play here. And this is a picture, a very interesting picture of the ram and the thickets that turns up in the story of Abraham when he had to sacrifice his son Isaac, and in fact ended up substituting Isaac for a ram which is caught in the thickets. Interesting to notice that this ram is depicted with feathers. It is a feathered ram. Again, this allegory turns up in many different cultures across the world, even in Egyptian iconography. Here we have a ram, you notice the horns, with feathers carved into it, okay? Feathers that kind of could be scales, which are symbolic of the dragon. But rams generally don't have feathers or scales, and yet here they are depicted on the Egyptian ram because of the intricate intermergence of symbolic allegory which masks the dragon. Never forget, symbolism is nothing more than a mechanism of subterfuge to mask the dragon. Our language, our letters, our words, the iconography we use, all of it is merely masking the existence and presence of the dragon, intricately interwoven into the very fabric of our reality. And that's it for today, folks. If you have missed anything, feel free to check out our website, dragonology.info. All shows are archived there, including Dragonology Seasons 1, 2, and 3. Please do join our private members association to receive all newsletters, and everyone's data is protected. And we look forward to hearing from you. Please do write to us, tell us what you think, give us suggestions, send us any information or pictures you may have. We're always interested in hearing from you. It's there's so many people all over the world who keep finding amazing things and bringing them forward. So we'd like to hear from you if you've made any interesting discoveries and wish to inform us. And we'll definitely make a point of bringing it onto the show. If you wish to learn more, please do download a copy of my book, Dragonology Spellbreaker, also available at dragonology.info. It's only €25, and all of this money actually helps to support our research. We really are truly free and independent, and we are not we're not sponsored by any corporatocracy, and we're totally free of governmental controls. We believe in providing information to people that helps to empower them. So support our work, people, and help us fund further Dragonology research. For those who want to learn a little bit more about some of the work that I've been doing, check out my documentary film, The Secrets of the Kalahari, where you can learn about the oldest dragon ritual worship site dating back over 70,000 years. This is also the oldest ancient civilization to have yet been identified. You can download a copy of my documentary film as well from dragonology.info. Please do follow us on Facebook. Go to our Facebook page, Dragonology Facebook page. All updates are put on there. Every time we put up a new archive, we let people know. And we'd love to hear from you through our website and through our Facebook page. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and it's one of the only places where you can find shows such as Dragonology. So please do support our Conscious Consumer Network Support Fund for 2018. Make a donation and keep us on air, folks. We do this because we love you all and truly believe in giving humanity empowering information so that you can understand what's really going on. As always, we thank you for supporting free and independent media. It's been great to be with you, and we'll see you again for episode 5 of season 4 of Dragonology. My name has been Mel V. It's been great to be with you as always. You take care.
Humanity has been on an epic journey of discovery, learning the truth about the world we live in. New discoveries about the true origins of humanity, ancient history, free energy, as well as the systematic corruption of world governments are now on the forefront of our daily reality. Is the world headed towards destruction based on control and power? Or is an opportunity now being presented to shift and uplift into a higher consciousness? My name is Mel V, co-founder and creative director of Conscious Consumer Network, an independent broadcast network that was launched on the 1st of January 2015. In the last 3 years, Conscious Consumer Network has broadcast over 2,800 shows in multiple languages, featuring guests from across the world, whilst creating media that is aimed at the creation of a free, fair, peaceful, just sustainable world. Conscious Consumer Network provides full training and an interactive support network for all broadcasters, and we are always looking for inspiring and educational content.
Hi, this is Lainey Liberty.
And this is Miro Siegel.
In 2018, Conscious Consumer Network has expanded to multiple broadcast locations, increasing our availability and reach across the world, remaining on the cutting edge of independent media. If we wish to create a better world, we must first create better media, geared towards real education instead of indoctrination.
You guys really are what changing the world is going to be about. It's educating kids at a grassroots level.
Having become a pillar of stability in the turbulent world of independent media, we have even more going on in 2018. Conscious Consumer Network is a publicly funded network, and we rely on all of you to keep us on the air. Show your support for independent media by donating to our 2018 Network Support Fund. Dare to seek a better world. Support independent media.